Wow, it has been an incredible morning, and it's so amazing to be standing on stage for the first time sharing my story. In 2010, I returned back from a short stint in art school, and I started attending talks and conferences, BIF, Better World by Design, Seed at Brown, and I thought, wow, maybe someday I can work up the courage to get on stage. So I'm here today, so bear with me. But it's an honor to be here and to be a part of Peace Love. I need a clicker. So before I begin, I would like to talk about my friend Emily's story. So Emily struggled with an eating disorder and drug addiction throughout middle and high school. She had a family that loved her and friends that cared about her. Emily was a gifted artist and a writer and a photographer with dreams of traveling the world and becoming a photojournalist. In 2010, the cyclical pattern of illness and recovery ended, and she died. She was my best friend. It's still hard to talk about 5 years later, 5 years and 11 days later. But what I learned with Emily's story is how complicated it is to ensure that someone gets the comprehensive, compassionate care that they need when they're struggling with a dual diagnosis of a mental health condition and drug addiction. So she was just 19 when she died, and before she died, she left me and many members of her family beautiful works of art. They were collages, and scattered within were pieces of advice that I can still turn to today. Like, don't procrastinate, it robs hours of meaning, or self-trust is the first secret to success. And there was one little part of it that I always turn to, and it was a quote that said, "Think of it as hope." And so reflecting back on that, I don't know where I would be today if I didn't have hope for a future without stigma for mental health. It's been amazing to hear everyone's story. Just that we can all connect in that, and that we can all share hope. So when she was in treatment, she confided to me that she often felt isolated and alone. And that was the case because Emily's parents had no other option than to have Emily become a ward of state because insurance wasn't covering her treatment to the extent that she needed. And there weren't that many community programs at the time of her illness, which began when she was 13, that really allowed her an outlet to express her whatever she was going through. So I thought when she was in treatment, I was so inspired by how she used art to help her. She wrote, she journaled, she made collages, she wrote letters, and she just brought her experience to life. And the principle that she shared throughout all of her creations was love and just connecting. So it's great to be here and share that message for her. But it left me wondering. Emily was in treatment with girls, and she witnessed people that didn't make it. And while her mental health disorder and her physical symptoms were addressed, her grief wasn't. And she didn't really have outlets that that she could carry with her, or other that other patients that were in her program. They didn't have expressive arts. Peace Love wasn't a thing at the time. And I lost my train of thought with that. So I'm going to apologize. So it just set me into motion of wondering how we can bring compassionate, creative healthcare to people. So I'd like to share a quote by the poet Pablo Neruda. He wrote, "There's no space wider than that of grief, and there's no universe like that which bleeds." And I could relate to that. I was completely plummeted into a whirlwind of grief. But grief, it's a human experience. Everyone will experience someone passing away. It's a part of life. But grief is often relegated to, hushed conversations. And when that happens, a grief gap, or what I like to call a grief gap, forms. And this can be in understanding, awareness, empathy, knowledge, or it can be in lack of resources like funding and support. I totally lost my train of thought. So while grief, bereavement practices, and views of life and death vary among and within cultures, there's biological and psychological implications for grief. I've worked with grieving college students for the past 2.5 years, and there's serious consequences, academic, social. In a semester of loss, your GPA greatly diminishes, and you are more susceptible for anxiety, depression, and things like that. So my story, when Emily passed away, I turned to what had always worked. When my family was going through a difficult time years before, my cousin handed me a bag of art supplies, and I just started making things, collages, everything. And when Emily passed away, I turned to bookbinding and paper making. And through that process, I was able to work out my grief and to create these vehicles with amazing different papers and textiles and things like that, create vehicles to tell my story that I didn't have a space to share it. So I did that, and but what I found, I turned to yoga. And yoga had always served as an outlet for me. Growing up, the daughter of a mom who worked tirelessly to ensure that I could pursue the things that I loved and have access to education and things like that, having time to practice alongside my mom when I was 11 years old was amazing. On my mat, I didn't feel anxious like I am right now. I wish I had my mat so I could just lead you all in a yoga practice. Woo! But I felt whole, and I felt complete, and I felt free, and I felt that I was capable of tackling anything that could come at me next. And those are principles that really helped me during my grieving journey. And so it helped me to think about ways in which I could serve the grieving community. So young adults my age that couldn't really talk to it about their parents or couldn't talk about these things because there's such stigma around suicide, drug addiction, eating disorders, things like that. And so I found myself asking these questions. How often do we think about the people who are invisibly lost in this grief gap? How often do we focus on the mental health implications of grief? And how do we help open the doors to conversation and support? These are the real questions that I've been investigating while I've been at URI and in school. And it led me to a whole new path of study that I didn't know I would set out on. And I stumbled upon a great organization based in Warwick, Rhode Island called Friends Way. And Friends Way stands for Families Reaching into Each New Day. And what they do is they're the only bereavement support program in the state, and they provide free grief support to families, kids, and teens throughout southeastern Massachusetts and Rhode Island. And Ryan Loisel is here today, and he's the program director. And I was sitting on a beach on Prudence Island with Emily's mom and her 2 younger brothers, and I was just Googling random things, I guess, and I stumbled upon Friends Way, and immediately I thought, wow, this is amazing. It's such a haven for healing and hope, and I wish that this was accessible for people like me who had lost a friend but didn't really know what to do or how to process it. And so I picked up my phone, I called and left a message, and Ryan called me back, and he said, the training starts today in 2 hours. How fast can you get here? So I ran up to the house, got my bag, jumped on the ferry, and I made it. And that was the beginning of my process of actively moving forward and for serving people who really, who need that encouragement and who need support. And from that, I realized that there was a big gap. There weren't college students at Friends Way. They only served young adults up until 18, but then what about the children that age out of the program at Friends Way that decide to stay at a school like URI? So Ryan and I teamed up and developed a chapter of Students of AMF, which stands for Actively Moving Forward. And what it is a support group and a service group that's specifically designed for grieving college students. And the support group meets 2 times a month, and it's just a space on campus where anyone can come. You don't have to come regularly. You don't even have to talk. You just can show up and connect with other people who are going what you're going through. And what better way to create hope and support and connection than just sharing your story? And so Amy Kinney from Peace Love came to our chapter and hosted a Story Shoes workshop. And what Story Shoes is, if you're not familiar, is Amy dumps out a giant collection of mismatched shoes, and everyone rushes to the center of the room, picks a shoe that speaks to them, and then has the opportunity to decorate it with whatever they want. It can be feathers, glue, not glitter, not glitter. And it was another way of creating a vehicle to tell your story. And with grief, it was so fitting because it got the people who weren't able to talk about their loss to express themselves at the end through art. And it was an amazing experience. And so the service group, part of the requirement was that we had to come up with an act of service. And it could be for if someone was in our group that lost someone to cancer, it could be participating in a walk in their honor, or it could be participating in hosting your own event on campus. And so we teamed up with Shri Studio, and 100% of our support group members came and participated in a full day of yoga. And some had never done yoga before, and they were terrified of it. They were like, I'm not flexible. This isn't happening. A full day. You're crazy. I'm not doing it. But they all showed up when it came to that day. And the feedback that I got from them was amazing. They said the same things, the similar things to what I felt. They felt whole. They felt complete. They felt like they had a space to just breathe and to cry if they wanted to move around, and to feel the places where grief and stress was kind of camping out in their bodies. And they got to work it out. And so that experience inspired me, and I have become a yoga teacher, which I never thought I would do in a million years, but I focused on grief relief yoga. And so what is that, and why is it important, and how is it different from any other yoga class? I'm still figuring that out, but what I know from my experience over the past 4 years is that it's so important just to have that space, just to breathe and to connect with people, to connect with yourself, and to know that even if you're going through chaos all around you and you have no idea what the heck is going on, you're on an emotional roller coaster, you're in this crazy fluid process of grief, you can turn to your mat and you can settle in and you can figure it out. So I've been working on that, but my bigger focus is global mental health. And what is that? And how can we ensure that people around the world who live on less than $2 a day can have access to mental wellness, or to the things that keep them well? So I was recently in Nepal 2 weeks before the earthquake, and I was traveling with the University of Rhode Island Center for Nonviolence and Peace Studies. And I've thought a lot about what peace is and what it means to me. And one of the principles of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is that, peace can't happen if you're having internal violence of your spirit. If you don't feel safe and at home and supported and connected to your purpose and who you are, then there's no way we're going to have world peace. It just can't happen. So how can we find ways to keep people well? So I was leading a training in nonviolence with 50 Nepalese university students, NGO directors, police and army officials, and it was amazing to hear their stories of hope and of how they can create a better nation for themselves. And so we got the opportunity to tour some of our partner organizations there. And this is at the Early Childhood Development Center, where Pushpa Basnet and her sister Purnima rescue children from prisons. Because in Nepal, if your mom is convicted of a crime, the child often goes with the mother because there isn't care. So Pushpa goes in and rescues the children, and then she pairs them with an education, housing, love, access to healthcare, mental health care, and play. And so when we went to visit them, these two girls never left my side. We danced, we sang, we listened to stories that they told, and it was incredible. And what I learned from that is that no matter what situation you're in, there's always, always, always hope. And so this is after the earthquake. And the home that they were living in was completely destroyed. And the two girls that were by my side are now right there outside trying to rebuild and just stay safe with clean water and, the basic necessities. But what I found amazing about every person that I've stayed in touch with throughout the experience of the earthquakes is how connected we are through technology and how capable we are to build, to bridge this grief gap. I had my whole idea and master plan of what that entails using technology, movement, and art. But the basic thing is just sharing your story and just checking in with people and seeing how they're doing. So I've been keeping tabs on what's going on, and I was so happy to see the Children's Art Museum of Nepal partner up with UNICEF to create child-friendly spaces, which are tents where children can go. There's an art therapist on site, but mostly it's just volunteers from the community. And it looked like a pop-up peace love workshop. There's books, there's paintbrushes, there's dolls, everything. They can build and explore and just really focus on the things that keep them well. Kids need art. That is the Children's Museum mantra. But we all need art. It helps us cope with whatever's going on around us. So this looked like a peace love photo to me, but they're just being kids and just having a place to explore. This is a mural that I was so determined to find when I was in Nepal, and we eventually found it after riding around on a motorcycle for 2 hours. But I wanted to leave you with these 4 principles. Whether someone you know is struggling with grief or struggling with a mental illness or rebuilding after an earthquake, stay present. I was told by my friend Emily's mom that presence is the best gift that you can give someone. You don't have to say the right words. It's actually better if you don't, because the things that come out of our mouth when we're uncomfortable are really strange and don't really help people feel better. And so just stay present and to sit with it and to leave space for them to find how they can create peace of mind for themselves. We're not there to fix them. And for so long, I felt like, I could save Emily, or that I could save all the girls that were struggling with eating disorders, all the young men that had issues with drug addiction. But you can't. All you can do is create environments where they can explore and where they can play and they can find hope and they can create peace of mind for themselves. And thirdly, make art. Making art helped me through my grief, and it helped Emily too. And she left behind amazing things, and she sparked a whole movement of girls in eating disorder units writing letters to us, creating collages, finding ways to express themselves where they couldn't before, and helping themselves make it through recovery. And lastly, create hope. Really, I've said the word hope probably way too many times during this talk, but it's the most important thing, because without it, what do we have, really? So I think it's very important for everyone to just keep on telling their story. However, shaky your voice is, or if it feels like you're going to have a heart attack, just do it. Just tell your story, because that's how connection and healing and hope happens. So I leave you with a photo. This is on January 24th, I think probably 3 years after Emily passed away. It was her birthday. And each year we do something very simple. We just get together and we pay it forward. And it has been tremendously healing. And these are her two little brothers, Sam and Ben, her mom, who's here today, and her friend Melissa, who's also struggling with an eating disorder, who we became really close with after Emily passed away. And we wrote messages on balloons and released them. And just the simple act of doing that, creating a message and then releasing it, is incredibly powerful. So thank you for participating in this with me. Take care.
Great job.